Welcome to James Joyce's divine and delirious comedy Finnegans Wake. In this episode, number 28, we'll hear Irish-Canadian actor and my good friend and colleague Richard Harte performing pages 123 to 125 to conclude Chapter 5 of Joyce's last novel. I'm Adam Seelig, the director of the reading you'll soon hear. Finnegans Wake is a production of One Little Goat Theatre Company. One Little Goat is filming and recording all 17 chapters, roughly 30 hours, of Joyce's Finnegans Wake before live audiences in various locations, screening and releasing them along the way with the aim of completing the entire book for its 90th birthday, May 4th, 2029. One Little Goat Theatre Company is an official charity in Canada and the United States. To help us produce this first-of-its-kind filmed reading series, of which we've filmed 8 chapters so far with 9 more to go, please visit onelittlegoat.org to make a charitable donation. Your donation enables us to bring this production to audiences and helps support the outstanding artists who make it possible. To be the first to hear about our live tapings, events, and screenings, please join our mailing list, also at onelittlegoat.org. The popular TV series CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, has franchises in several cities, including CSI New York and CSI Miami. Now prepare to add CSI Dublin to your watch list, because in today's concluding excerpt from Chapter 5 of Finnegans Wake, we open with a highly technical, microscopic, forensic analysis of the letter on par with the police procedural lab montages of CSI, for which the show is so famous and so famously mocked. In lieu of CSI Miami's Horatio Caine and his laboratory of forensic scientists, today's excerpt gives us the fictional critic Duff Mugley and his ludicrous, quote, dextroscophonious photosensation under suprasonic light control at a millicentime the microamp. Duff Mugley's forensic examination of the letter is not exactly helped by the psychosexual analysis of, quote, tongue-toyed, suggesting Jung and Freud, also mentioned earlier in the chapter, who may be as tongue-tied as Duff Mugley is deaf-mute. And yet we're getting closer to solving the mystery at the heart of Chapter 5. That is, the mystery of who in fact wrote the letter. Quote, the unmistaken identity of the persons in the Tiberiest duplex came to light in the most devious of ways. Hold on. Persons who wrote the letter, plural, not person who wrote the letter, singular? Let's read on. Quote, the original document was in what is known as Hanno Onan Hanno's unbrookable script. That is to say, it showed no signs of punctuation of any sort. Close quote. This is true. The letter back on page 111, as we heard in our podcast episode about the letter from Boston, is indeed punctuationless, aside from the big brown T stain at the end. And while it was written in what may appear like an unbreakable code or, quote, unbrookable script, we're about to decode it by holding it up to light, in this case the light of a candle or a, quote, lit rush. A rushlight is an improvised candle made by dipping a rush in grease. It's also older English slang for cheap liquor or moonshine. So while the Wake's techniques for analyzing the letter are a century behind the fancy forensic lamps of CSI that find the invisible evidence of body fluids, hairs and fibers, etc., holding the letter up to a primitive light source still leads to a breakthrough in our investigation, revealing 4 holes, quote, made by a pronged instrument. A 4-pronged instrument. Sounds like a fork. Perhaps the fork of a professor, quote, Brotfresser Prendergast, close quote, poking at the letter paper with his fork at the breakfast table. But the professor is a, quote, deeply religious man. He wouldn't harm the letter. So perhaps the 4 punctures are from the beak of Belinda the hen, who plucked out the letter from the litter. Spoiler alert, if you do not want the identity of the letter writer revealed until the very last line of today's excerpt, please jump ahead to Richard's reading and then feel free to come back. For the rest of you who are fine to solve the mystery now or already know it, I'll carry on. The beginning and middle of Chapter 5 attribute the letter to the Wake's female protagonist, Anna Livia Pluribel, a woman, wife of H.C. Earwicker, mother of Sean, Shem, and Issy. The opening describes, quote, her untitled Mama Festa, close quote, a mother-wife's defense of her much-maligned husband. The middle of Chapter 5 on page 111 gives us the letter itself, albeit strangely unpunctuated and unsigned, and it too appears to be the product of a woman. It's addressed to another woman named Maggie or Margaret. It includes details like wedding cakes that typically, and certainly last century, fall within a woman's purview. And 2 pages later, we hear commentary about what she writes, or, quote, schreites, in the letter, culminating in a 100-letter thunderword focused on women and literature. But now, at the end of Chapter 5, attributing the letter to ALP seems increasingly doubtful. Our previous episode's excerpt, for example, concluded by asking, provocatively, if, quote, the vaulting feminine libido, close quote, of the letter was perhaps, quote, sternly controlled and easily repersuaded by the uniform matter-of-factness of a meandering male fist. And if so, perhaps that male is one of ALP's sons, quote, formerly confounded with a mother, close quote. But that son couldn't possibly be the do-gooder Sean. It would have to be the good-for-nothing Shem, quote, a sigh for Shime, oh the petty bonny rouge. He sounds not only devious, but, in his rougy redness, devilish, precisely the kind of character capable of epistolary deception. No wonder the letter wasn't signed. It's the work of a fraud, and Shem is far from faithful. As we'll hear today, quote, he remains years most painfully. Shem is the penman behind the letter, much to the disgust of the Wake, which can't help but spit invective on him at the mere mention of his name. Quote, kak, pfui, bosh. Thus, the letter of Chapter 5, ostensibly written by ALP in defense of HCE, is actually penned by their disreputable son, Shem. Our chapter, which began with an Eve in defense of Adam, quote, Anna the All-Merciful, the ever-living, the bringer of plurabilities, haloed be her Eve, ultimately ends with Cain. Not, mind you, Horatio Cain of CSI Miami, but his biblical forebear. We've reached a turning point in our novel. The next 2 chapters, 6 and 7, will focus on the relationship and, in the spirit of Cain and Abel, conflict of brothers Shem and Sean. Now it's time for Richard's performance of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, page 123, line 11, to the end of page 125 for the conclusion of Chapter 5. The performance was filmed and recorded at the Thomas Fisher Rare Book Library at the University of Toronto on October 21st, 2024, with a live audience. We'll open with a musical introduction which I wrote for piano trio with Tyler Imond on bass and Janu Isaac on drums. The title of this short piece is Breakfast.
Duff Mugley, who now may be quoted by very kind arrangement. His dectascophonious photosensation under supersonic light control may be logged for by our none-too-distant futures as soon as stone values can be turned out from chromophilaments limited at a millicentime the microamp. First called this kind of paddy-go-easy partnership the Eulochian, or tetrachiric, or quadromain, or ducks and drakes, or debts and dishes perplex. Some forestallings over that studium of sexophonologistic schizophrenesis, volume 24, pages 2 to 555, after the well-informed observation Made miles apart from the master by tongue-tied, CF, later frustrations amongst the neo-Muglian teachings abaft the semi-unconscious pass him that in the case of the little-known periplic bestseller popularly associated with the names of the wretched mariner, try and for an deaf we doff our plum-sucked pattern-shaped keeper, a Punic Admiralty report from Macpherson's ocean round by the tides of Jason's cruise had been cleverly capsized and saucily republished as a dodecahedron Baedeker of the every tale a treating itself variety, which could hope satisfactorily to tickle me gander as game as your goose. The unmistaken identity of the persons in the Tiberius duplex came to light in the most devious of ways. The original document was in what is known as Hanno o non-Hanno's unbrookable script. That is to say, it showed no signs of punctuation of any sort. Yet, on holding the verso against a lit rush, this new book of Morses responded most remarkably to the silent query of our world's oldest light, and its recto let out the piquant fact that it was both pierced, but not punctured, in the university sense of the term, by numerous stabs and foliated gashes made by a pronged instrument. These paper wounds, 4 in type, were gradually and correctly understood to mean stop, please stop, do please stop, and oh, do please stop, respectively. And following up on their one true clue, the circumflexuous wall of a single-minded men's asylum, accentuated by bits of broken English and split china, your inquiries pointed out that they had been provoked by a fork of a grave professor at his breakfast table, acutely professionally piqued to introduce a notion of time upon a plane surface by puncting holes in sick space. Deeply religious by nature and position, and warmly attached to thee, and smear bread and better and him and new ladies. It was rightly suspected that such ire could not have been visited by him, brought Fresser Prendergast, even underwittingly, upon the ancestral pneuma of one home with Roma, he venerated shamelessly at least once a week at Cockspur Common, as his apple in his eye, and her first boy's best friend. And though plain English for a married lady misled heaps by the way, yet when some peerer or peeress detected that the 4-leaved shamrock or quadrifoil jab was more recurrent wherever the script was clear, or the term terse, and that these two were the self-same spots naturally selected for her perforations by Dame Parklet on her dung heap, thinkers all but groan in water on spillful pratey land only, and a playful fowl in musical me and not you, in any case, 2 and 2 together. And with a swarm of bisses honey hunting after, a sigh for shime. Oh, the petty bonny rouge! Separated modest mouths. So be it. And it was. The letter-making of the ex-plots of Fjorn Camilson when he was in the Cavin's country with Solru's men. With acknowledgement of our fervour of the first instant, he remains years most faithfully. For postscript, see spoils. Though not yet had the sailor sipped that sup, nor the humfar foam to the fill, and fox and geese still kept the peace around l'auberge du Père Adam. Small need after that. Old Jerome Solem, old Huff Snuff, old Andy Cox, old Ola Cassandrum, for quizzing your weekenders come to the RQ with, shoots off in a hiss, muddles up in a muss mass, and his hauls a dismantled noon drunkard's son. Albeit we are not a son of sons to leave by him to oceanic society, and his old man without a thing in his ignorance, Tulko McCooley. And it was thus it was at every time, that son, and the other time, the day was in it and after the morrow. Dire mood is the name, is on the writing chap of the Psalter. The juxtajunctor of a dear mate, and him passing out of one desire into its fellow. Oh, the daughters are after going illusion for him. Torba's nice lookers of the fair neck. Wanted for millinery servants to Olderly's person by the totty Askinses. Formerly confounded with a mother. Maybe growing a moustache, did you say, with an adorable look of amusement. And uses no class billiard halls with an up and down ladder. Not Hans the Courier. No, had he had to have only had some little laughings and some blessed cheeks, were he not so worried by his bulba persecution, he could have, aye, and would have, as true as Essex Bridge. And not go gossip, I declare to man, no. To all's much relief, one's half-hypothesis of that jabberjaw ape amok the shower and chestnuts of bruise and nose was hotly dropped, and his room taken up by that odious and still today insufficiently mal-estimated note-snatcher cat, pooey, bosh and fighty, Majorny Ghost Putcheen, says you. Shem the Penman.
That was Richard Harte reading the concluding pages of Chapter 5 from Finnegans Wake, recorded live at the Fisher Rare Book Library in Toronto on October 21st, 2024. Join us for episode 29 when Richard begins Chapter 6 of Finnegans Wake. This podcast series is taking a break between chapters to focus on the film production and editing of future chapters, so please note that the exact date of the next episode's release is to be determined, and we'll then resume our fortnightly podcast releases every other Thursday. In the meantime, to be sure you don't miss the episode, why not follow or subscribe to this podcast? For more on One Little Goat's Finnegans Wake project, including transcripts of this podcast and the complete films of chapters 1, 2, and 3, visit our website at onelittlegoat.org. And to hear about upcoming performances and screenings, join our mailing list also on our website. One Little Goat Theatre Company is a non-profit, artist-driven, registered charity in the United States and Canada that depends on donations from individuals to make our productions, including this one, possible. If you're able, please make a tax-deductible donation through our website, www.onelittlegoat.org. Finnegans Wake is made possible by Friends of One Little Goat Theatre Company and the Immigrant Support Program of the Government of Ireland. Thank you for your support. And thank you to the artists for this episode. Richard Harte, sound by William Bembridge, stage management by Sandy Becker, directed by yours truly, Adam Seelig. Music arranged and performed on the piano by me, with Tyler Imam on bass and Janu Isaac on drums, recorded at Ghost Town Studio in Toronto. A big thanks to John Shoesmith, Special Collections Librarian, to David Fernandez, Head of Rare Books and Special Collections, and to their colleagues at the Fisher Rare Book Library at the University of Toronto, as well as to our wonderful live audience. Thank you to the team at the Irish Consulate in Toronto, and thank you to production consultants Kathy Murphy and Andrew Moody. Thank you for listening.